What if the individual who discarded you like an old newspaper had to witness you claiming an immense empire? Picture being so completely removed from your former spouse's existence that he gazes straight past you in a social setting. Now envision his expression at his own lavish fundraising event when it is revealed that you, the lady he considered insignificant, are the only beneficiary of a fortune worth billions. This is no fantasy. It is the tale of Sophia Moretti, a disregarded spouse who was on the verge of making everyone, particularly the man who shattered her, remember that the strongest inheritances rise from the ruins of disloyalty. Sophia Moretti had perfected the skill of fading into the background. It was not a talent she had pursued, but one she had developed during the past 2 years, similar to a film of grime accumulating on an abandoned painting. Her existence had contracted to the dimensions of her modest, sunlight-filled flat in Silver Lake, far removed from the expansive Beverly Hills mansion she had previously shared. Her routine was marked by the soft snaps of her camera lens and the tangy scent of developing solutions. Photography served as her sole act of defiance, the process of documenting the planet's splendor, a muted defiance against the harshness of her personal oblivion. On this day, the sharp autumn breeze of the city matched the frost in her soul. She was transporting a collection of images to an art space in West Hollywood, a minor achievement that seemed enormous. As she held the folder close, she spotted him, Alexander Harrington, her previous husband. He was emerging from a sleek limousine, his dark navy coat flawlessly fitted, his graying locks arranged with the identical exacting care he devoted to his corporate negotiations. And linked to his elbow was Victoria Beaumont, a lady whose whole persona appeared designed for social media, full of crisp lines, radiant grins, and seamless elegance. They were chuckling, a noise that pierced Sophia's ears like broken shards. For a foolish, impulsive instant, her steps halted. A remnant of a recollection emerged, Alex long ago, declaring she was the sole authentic element in his realm of glossy pretenses. The thought evaporated as swiftly as it appeared. They advanced toward her, Victoria's high heels tapping a pointed beat on the sidewalk. Sophia's pulse raced against her chest. Simply continue forward. Avoid eye contact. Remain unseen. But it was already past the point. Alex's eyes passed over her, a quick, indifferent scan. There was no acknowledgement, not even a spark. It was not the courteous deflection of a past partner dodging an uncomfortable meeting. It was the empty, oblivious glance one offers to an unfamiliar face, a fragment of the urban landscape. He had stared directly through her. Victoria, though, hesitated, her flawlessly shaped eyebrow rising in a measured, intentional evaluation of Sophia's faded denim, her practical shoes, her plain fleece jacket. A subtle, sympathetic sneer graced her mouth before Alex urged her onward. The folder in Sophia's grasp abruptly seemed overwhelmingly burdensome. The chill was no longer merely in the atmosphere. It penetrated her core, a profound internal frost. He had not simply progressed. He had purged her from his narrative. The 8 years of their union, her concessions, her backing as he constructed his economic dominion, her steadfast faith in him, had been wiped from his recollection. Trembling, she compelled herself to proceed, rounding the bend and resting against the chilly stone of a structure, her respiration emerging in uneven gasps. The shame was tangible, a scorching surge that enveloped her, succeeded by an intense, painful isolation. That night, the urban glow beyond her pain offered scant relief from the melancholy. She was processing pictures in her improvised darkroom when the buzzer rang, jolting her. It was the complex's porter. "Miss Moretti, a messenger is here for you. Requires your signature." Bewildered, she descended. The messenger presented her with a stiff, premium paper envelope. The sender's address belonged to a renowned legal practice, Lawson, Pierce, and Harlan. Her gut nodded. Legal offices only signified problems. Had Alex discovered a fresh method to harass her, an overlooked obligation? Returning to her flat, she sliced the envelope with shaky digits. Within was a solitary page of embossed stationery. The message was concise and official. It solicited her attendance at their premises the next Monday at 10 in the morning for the disclosure of the final testament of their patron, Mr. Reginald Hawthorne. Sophia perused the name once more, Reginald Hawthorne. It required a second to identify him. Not the affluent magnate of identical nomenclature, who was famously secluded, but Reg, the reserved, senior gentleman who frequented the bistro, where she had labored part-time for the initial 6 months post-separation. He invariably occupied the edge booth with a plain espresso and a periodical, his gaze benevolent yet fatigued. They had formed a tender companionship, discussing vintage movies and the shifting weather. She had shared details of her photography, and he had attended with a focus that made her feel noticed for the first time in ages. He had ceased visiting several months prior. She had presumed he had relocated or become unwell. Moisture stung her eyes, this occasion not from mortification, but from a tender, authentic grief for the departure of a companion, but his testament. Why would she be invited? He had referenced lacking kin. Maybe he had bequeathed her a volume from his assortment. A minor, heartfelt token. It must be. With a breath, she set the message on her surface. The enigma, a tiny, intriguing spark in the immense obscurity of her solitude. The premises of Lawson, Pierce, and Harlan exemplified traditional affluence and understated authority. Walnut panels, volumes encased in hide that appeared untouched for generations, and a panorama of Griffith Park that likely exceeded the value of Sophia's whole residence. She felt diminutive and misplaced in her basic ebony gown, the sole respectable one she possessed. She was guided into a meeting chamber where a senior gentleman with a compassionate, grave countenance stood to welcome her. "Miss Moretti, I am Edward Sinclair. Appreciate your presence." "Certainly," she whispered, her tone scarcely audible. "I was deeply saddened to learn of Reg, Mr. Hawthorne. He was a wonderful individual." Mr. Sinclair indicated a seat. "He was truly. He regarded you highly." Sophia seated herself, her palms gripped firmly in her lap. She was the solitary attendee. "I am somewhat perplexed regarding my presence here, Mr. Sinclair." The attorney offered her a mild, insightful glance. He positioned himself across from her, the gleaming surface mirroring their forms like a shadowy, motionless pond. He pushed a substantial compiled manuscript to the middle of the surface. "Sophia, may I address you as Sophia?" Reginald was quite precise in his directives. He was an individual who prized authentic bonds above everything. He sensed the society had grown mercenary, a sequence of strategic traits. He informed me that in you he discovered something he believed had disappeared from existence. Pure, unspoiled benevolence. Sophia flushed, uncertain how to reply. "We merely conversed." He was straightforward to converse with. "You perceived a solitary elder and provided him your moments and your attention without anticipating compensation." Sinclair proceeded, his tone gentle. "You never inquired about his identity, his occupation, or his value. You simply perceived him. For that motive, he has designated you in his testament." He adjusted his throat and unveiled the manuscript. "I will skip the juridical protocols and proceed to the relevant provision. To Sophia Moretti, who demonstrated to an aged man that a person's spirit could still serve as a haven of tranquility, I bestow the totality of my holdings, encompassing all real estate, resources, equities, and dominant stake in Hawthorne International Corporation." The phrases lingered in the hushed, climate-controlled space. Sophia gazed at him, a courteous, baffled grin on her visage. She was certain she had misunderstood. "Pardon me, the complete holdings." "Sophia, no, you fail to comprehend. The Reginald Hawthorne I acquainted was merely Reg, a retired literature instructor. He claimed he resided in a compact flat downtown. Mr. Sinclair's demeanor was replete with empathy. He did preserve a minor, unassuming flat for his personal serenity, but he was also the Reginald Hawthorne, originator and chief executive of Hawthorne International Corporation. Sophia's thoughts emptied. The chamber appeared to slant, the vista of the park oscillating unsteadily. She clutched the supports of her seat. That is impossible. That individual is a multimillionaire. Was Sinclair amended softly. His holdings following an initial appraisal are projected to be valued at roughly $18 billion. $18 billion. The figure was preposterous. It was an idea, not an actuality. Sophia sensed a frenzied chuckle rise in her larynx, but it emerged as a stifled weep. Why? Why me? It lacks logic. He prepared a message for you, Sinclair stated, advancing a secured ivory envelope across the surface. He articulates it superior to what I could. Sophia accepted the envelope. Her designation was inscribed on the exterior in Reg's recognizable, marginally unsteady script. She could not muster the resolve to unseal it. Not presently. Her whole existence had been splintered in the duration of a moment. The ground under her resembled granules. We will manage all aspects, Mr. Sinclair guaranteed her. The shift, the media, the directors. We possess a group prepared. Reginald foresaw this would be astonishing. Our main objective is to safeguard you. The remainder of the session was indistinct. Sinclair discussed funds and subsidiary entities of director positions and charitable organizations. Sophia affirmed, but the terms were merely noises. She contemplated Alex, of his rejecting glimpse. She reflected on the disdainful curl on Victoria's lips. She considered her minuscule flat and the battle to cover expenses. The subdued despair that had been her perpetual associate. $18 billion. It was not a prize. It resembled an armament. A frightening, extraordinarily ponderous armament had just been positioned in her grasp, and she lacked knowledge on how to employ it. As she departed the edifice and re-entered the vibrant Los Angeles Avenue, the metropolis appeared altered. The individuals, the vehicles, the soaring edifices, they all appeared components of a realm she no longer fitted into. She was a specter who had just acquired a dominion, and the mass of it menaced to overwhelm her. The summons came 2 days afterward, conveyed by courier, dense imprinted parchment proclaiming the Harrington Charitable Trust yearly soiree. It was Alex's premier accomplishment, an evening where the metropolis's upper class assembled to donate funds and bolster their self-images. A summons was dispatched to the holdings of Reginald Hawthorne, a politeness to a departed commercial colossus. Mr. Sinclair had it redirected to her. You are not obligated to attend, he had remarked via telephone, his tone infused with worry. But Sophia recognized she must. It was not concerning retribution. Not precisely. It was regarding reclamation. For 2 years, she had permitted herself to be a phantom. Alex had gazed through her because she had allowed herself to become translucent. This evening, she would solidify once more. The metamorphosis demanded a brigade. A squad assembled by Sinclair invaded her flat. A fashion consultant, a hairstylist, a cosmetic specialist. They communicated in subdued, venerating inflections. Sophia felt akin to a sculpture being readied for display. She selected a garment of rich emerald satin that cascaded like a stream. It was uncomplicated, refined, and completely authoritative. A chain of emeralds and gems from Reginald's repository lay against her neckline, frigid and substantial as protective gear. When she regarded the reflection, she failed to identify the lady gazing back. The tormented, exhausted appearance in her gaze was absent, substituted by a concentrated, resolute serenity. This was not Sophia Moretti, the overlooked spouse. This was the successor to the Hawthorne Dominion. The soiree was occurring at the Getty Center in the majestic, sanctuary-like atrium of ancient artifacts. The atmosphere vibrated with influence, riches, and simulated earnestness. As Sophia alighted from the limousine, several flashes ignited, their wielders probably pondering who this unfamiliar, captivating lady was. She ascended the magnificent stairway unaccompanied, her chin elevated. She observed Alex near the ingress, presiding over a group, Victoria attached to his limb like a luxury adornment. He was in his domain, a ruler in his realm. Sophia's heart throbbed painfully, but she stabilized herself. She was not present for him. She was present for her own sake. She accepted a flute of sparkling wine from a circulating server and located a serene niche, observing the activities. Individuals glimpsed at her, their interest aroused by her unknown countenance and the stunning adornments. She disregarded them. She was anticipating. Following 60 minutes of socializing, the illumination softened. Alex ascended the platform, a self-assured, enchanting beam affixed to his features. He articulated gracefully about benevolence, about heritage, about forging an improved tomorrow. Sophia had to concede he excelled at this. He could market authenticity to a skeptic. Heritage is not solely about what we construct, he proclaimed, his timbre echoing through the expansive atrium. It concerns who perpetuates it. It involves guaranteeing that our endeavors, our principles persist in molding the globe long after our departure. As he concluded to a burst of fervent acclaim, he stayed on the platform. And presently we possess a distinctive, if mournful, declaration. As numerous of you are aware, our metropolis lately forfeited a genuine behemoth of commerce, a gentleman whose heritage is boundless. Mr. Reginald Hawthorne. A deferential hum traversed the assembly. Alex persisted, his enduring juridical advisor, Mr. Edward Sinclair, is present to utter a few remarks about the destiny of the Hawthorne Foundation, which has been a steadfast ally to our own. Sophia's inhalation faltered. It was transpiring. Mr. Sinclair, appearing eminent and composed, proceeded to the lectern. He modified the amplifier. Gratitude, Alexander. Reginald Hawthorne was a gentleman of immense foresight and even superior seclusion. His ultimate desires were a mirror of his distinctive temperament. While the Hawthorne Foundation will certainly sustain its efforts with a fresh allocation, his chief heritage, his complete individual and organizational holdings, is to be confided to one person. The assembly murmured with expectation. Designations were murmured. A speculated concealed offspring, a distant kin. Sinclair permitted the tension to accumulate briefly before resuming. Reginald thought that temperament was shaped not in executive suites, but in the serene instances of empathy. He pursued a replacement who held not a desire for dominance, but a capability for poise. He has conferred the totality of his wealth and dominant stake in Hawthorne International Corporation to an individual he deemed represented that essence. He halted and his gaze surveyed the assembly, ultimately settling on Sophia's niche. He provided a faint, nearly undetectable affirmation. That person is among us this evening. Kindly unite with me in recognizing the exclusive successor to the Hawthorne Holdings, Ms. Sophia Moretti. A unified inhalation depleted the oxygen from the space. The quietude that ensued was total, overwhelming. Every cranium pivoted, seeking. On the platform, Alex's enchanting beam solidified, then disintegrated. The hue escaped his countenance, yielding a pallid, waxen pallor. He gaped at Sinclair, his orbs broad with complete, incomprehensible incredulity. Victoria's palm, which had been positioned on his limb, fell aside as she examined the assembly with a frantic, perplexed demeanor. Gradually, elegantly, Sophia emerged from the obscurity. The emerald garment appeared to seize and retain the luminescence. The gems encircling her throat sparkled like frost. She encountered Alex's stare across the spacious chamber. The astonishment on his features was rapidly supplanted by a whirlwind of sentiments, bewilderment, fury, and an emerging, nauseating dread. He was observing her now, genuinely observing her. And in his orbs, she perceived not merely identification, but the horrifying awareness that the phantom he had overlooked, the lady he had obliterated, now possessed the authority to obliterate him. The unseen lady was now the most influential individual in the chamber. The consequences were a deluge. The soiree exploded into a chaos of murmurs and anxious glimpses. Sophia did not remain to observe Alex's communal collapse. Escorted by two unobtrusive protection agents engaged by Sinclair, she was hurried away prior to any journalist could approach her, abandoning a detonation of her own creation to explode in her non-attendance. The subsequent morning, her designation was ubiquitous. The enigmatic successor, the server who acquired billions, the former spouse's supreme reprisal. They depicted her as a modern-day rags-to-riches figure, an opportunist, a retaliatory deity. None comprehended the reality. None knew of the tranquil dialogues over espresso with a solitary elder. Her telephone, a basic apparatus she seldom employed, became a fount of alarm. Communications and messages inundated from individuals she had not contacted in years. Remote family members, former university acquaintances, and naturally, Alex. He had dialed 37 occasions. He had deposited a sequence of progressively frantic recordings. "Sophie, contact me. There has been an error. Sophia, we must converse. This is mad. For heaven's sake, what is occurring? How could you accomplish this? I fail to grasp. That elder from the bistro. Was this a scheme? Were you deceiving me throughout?" His perplexity was interwoven with an outrage that was so characteristically Alex. The presumption that this also was somehow centered on him. The notion that she possessed an existence, a bond, a fate independent from his was unimaginable to him. To evade the assault on her Silver Lake flat, Mr. Sinclair had her relocated into Reginald's abode, the uppermost suite atop the Hawthorne Tower on Wilshire Boulevard. It was less a residence and more a celestial palace, a multi-level expanse of crystal, metal, and rock with sweeping vistas of the metropolis. The area was enormous, hushed, and profoundly isolating. It was brimming with invaluable artwork, a book collection that extended across dual levels, and furnishings that appeared too exquisite to utilize. It seemed as if she were intruding. She roamed through the silent chambers, her footfalls resounding on the stone surfaces. This was Reginald's domain. The serene, benevolent man in the faded corduroy blazer had dwelled here, encircled by a degree of prosperity she could not fathom. It merely intensified the puzzle of him. On a grand maple workstation in his book room, she ultimately located the message. Her digits quivered as she unsealed it. "My cherished Sophia, if you are perusing this, then I have departed and your existence has been inverted. Pardon an aged man's theatrics. I envision you have numerous inquiries, the most urgent of which is why you." The response is both straightforward and intricate. The straightforward response is that I appreciated you. You possess a noble spirit, a subdued fortitude, and you perceive the globe through a creator's perspective. You search for loveliness in the neglected nooks. When you addressed me, you were not addressing a multimillionaire. You were addressing a human. You lack awareness of how uncommon and valuable that is. The more intricate response pertains to my heritage. I erected a dominion, but dominions can be monstrous entities if entrusted to improper custodians. They can pulverize the very individuals they are intended to aid. I have observed men akin to your previous husband, Alexander Harrington, throughout my existence. They are individuals who view people as tools, connections as deals, and heritage as a tribute to their own vanity. They are vacant individuals. I could not, in sound judgment, permit my life's labor to be assimilated by men like him. I did not select you to chastise him, Sophia. I selected you to preserve my enterprise from him and all the men resembling him. I am granting you this authority not as a compensation, but as an obligation. It is a burdensome load. I recognize you will be challenged. Individuals will attempt to influence you, dominate you, and undervalue you. They will perceive a server, a rejected former spouse. Permit them. Your fortitude has never resided in what they perceive, but in what you perceive. Be prudent. Be vigilant. But above all, be authentic. The globe possesses sufficient despots. It requires more creators, more serene watchers, more benevolent spirits. Do not permit this wealth to alter the finest aspects of you. Permit it to enhance them. Your companion, Reginald. Tears cascaded down Sophia's cheeks as she absorbed the message. The burden on her frame adjusted. It remained substantial, but it was no longer the inert mass of bewildering fortune. It was the burden of intent. Reginald had not merely bestowed her his wealth. He had bestowed her his trust. A signal from the uppermost suite's internal mechanism startled her. The structure's chief of protection appeared on the display monitor. Madam, apologies for the interruption. Mr. Harrington is in the entrance hall. He is insisting on meeting you. He is creating quite a disturbance. Sophia's veins chilled. He had located her here in this aerial stronghold. He was still endeavoring to invade. The former Sophia would have concealed. She would have instructed the sentinel to dispatch him and then expended the remainder of the day quivering. But as she regarded Reginald's message, something novel and firm established in her breast. She inhaled deeply. Informed Mr. Harrington, she stated, her tone balanced and distinct, that Ms. Moretti is unavailable. Not presently, not eternally. She terminated the link before the sentinel could respond. She had established her initial limit. It was a minor deed, but resembled a proclamation of conflict, a conflict for her own essence. Sophia's initial day at Hawthorne International Corporation was akin to entering an alternate world. The central offices, occupying the uppermost 20 levels of the tower she now inhabited, were a harmony of subdued, daunting productivity. Individuals in impeccably cut attire moved with a muffled haste, their expressions stern and concentrated. When they noticed her, they gawked, their demeanors a blend of admiration, doubt, and overt inquisitiveness. She was an anomaly in their framework, a flaw in the mechanism. Mr. Sinclair accompanied her to the 80th level conference area. It was a barren, formidable expanse ruled by an enormous obsidian slate surface and a barrier of crystal surveying the metropolis. Positioned around the surface were the 12 directors, the colossi who had hitherto managed Reginald's dominion. They were all males, all exceeding 60, and they regarded her like a group of predators evaluating a fawn. Their chief was a gentleman named Marcus Everton, the chief operating officer and Reginald's enduring deputy. He possessed an aristocratic aura and eyes as frigid and ashen as a winter firmament. Ms. Moretti, he uttered, his timbre silky but lacking affection. He did not rise. Welcome to Hawthorne International. The implication was evident. Welcome to our domain. You do not fit here. Sophia occupied the vacant position at the forefront of the surface, Reginald's position. The seat resembled a monarchy, too vast and too significant for her. Mr. Sinclair positioned himself to her right, a mute, comforting attendance. Gratitude, Mr. Everton, Sophia stated, her tone more stable than she sensed. I recognize my designation is unconventional. Unconventional is one term for it. Another director grumbled, a stout gentleman with a flushed visage. Reginald was a prodigy, but in his concluding years, his oddity prevailed over him. Everton directed him a suppressing glance, but the feeling persisted in the atmosphere. They considered her a simpleton, a caprice of a perishing man. They were already scheming how to handle her, how to marginalize her, and maintain their dominance. Reginald was exceedingly explicit in his instructions. Mr. Sinclair interposed serenely. Ms. Moretti retains the commanding equities. Her decision is the sole one that ultimately signifies. She is the ultimate arbiter on all enterprise affairs. The males adjusted restlessly. The actuality of their novel authority structure was commencing to penetrate. Certainly, Everton stated, his inflection transitioning to one of patronizing sponsorship. We are all present to assist, Ms. Moretti, and guarantee a seamless shift. Perhaps you could commence by informing us a bit about your outlook for the enterprise. It was a snare. They anticipated her to lack an outlook, to express something innocent and utopian that they could readily reject. Sophia contemplated Reginald's message. Do not permit this wealth to alter the finest aspects of you. Permit it to enhance them. She encountered Everton's stare straightforwardly. My outlook, Mr. Everton, is to initially comprehend Mr. Hawthorne's outlook. I am not present to dismantle his life's labor. I am present to venerate it. For the ensuing few months, my strategy is to heed, to acquire every aspect of this enterprise. I will be convening with every section leader. I will be examining every principal initiative. I will not be implementing any noteworthy modifications until I comprehend this enterprise as thoroughly as Reginald did. Until then, I anticipate you all to persist in your responsibilities as you invariably have. Her reply astonished them. It was not senseless or sentimental. It was deliberate, deferential, and rational. It provided them not to assail. Everton's demeanor stayed stoic, but Sophia observed a glimmer of something fresh in his eyes, reluctant admiration. The session persisted for 2 hours. They communicated in a dialect of abbreviations and fiscal forecasts that was entirely alien to her. She did not feign comprehension. She attended, she recorded notations, and she posed uncomplicated, forthright inquiries that sporadically appeared to surprise them. Just as the session was concluding, Everton's aide entered, her countenance ashen. Mr. Everton, apologies for the disruption. Mr. Alexander Harrington is present. He lacks a scheduled meeting, but he demands to encounter Ms. Moretti. A surge of anger and apprehension enveloped Sophia here. He ventured to arrive here. Before she could retort, the conference doors opened wide, and Alex marched in, his features a veil of urgency and compelled allure. Sophie, thank heavens. I have been attempting to contact you. The directors gawked, astonished into muteness. Everton regarded Alex with complete disdain. Mr. Harrington, this is a confidential session, Everton stated, his tone perilously subdued. Alex overlooked him, his orbs fixed on Sophia. Please, merely 5 minutes. We must resolve matters. What these publications are declaring, it is lunatic. We can rectify this, you and I. He was striving to fabricate a story to suggest a plot between them before the directors. He was endeavoring to reclaim command. Sophia rose gradually. The chamber was mute. All orbs were upon her. She regarded the man she had once cherished, the man who had fractured her spirit, and then feigned she was non-existent. She perceived the wretched, clutching necessity behind his haughty veneer. The terror was absent. In its stead was a deep, glacial composure. Alex, she stated, her tones slicing through the strain. The sole element that requires resolution is you from this chamber. Protection. 2 sizable men materialized at the entrance promptly. Alex's features twisted in disbelief. Sophie, do not do this. My designation, she stated, her tone descending to a near murmur. Yet every individual in the chamber heard it is MS. Moretti, and you are intruding. As protection guided a stammering, shamed Alex out of the chamber, Sophia pivoted back to the astonished directors. She aligned her blazer, her demeanor inscrutable. Now, she stated as if naught had transpired. Where were we? The weeks that ensued were an arduous absorption. Sophia honored her commitment, evolving from successor into a learner. She reached the workplace before anyone else and departed long after they had left. She devoured analyses, fiscal declarations, and initiative suggestions like a famished individual at a feast. The vernacular of commerce was gradually becoming less unfamiliar, the patterns of the organizational realm more recognizable. She gained a fragment of esteem from the directors, who perceived that she was not the capricious simpleton they had foreseen. She was assiduous, astute, and most crucially, she attended. But Marcus Everton stayed a mystery. He was accommodating, expert, and completely indecipherable. He handled her with a formal respect, but she invariably sensed his frigid, scheming eyes upon her, anticipating her to err. Her genuine instruction originated from Reginald's ancient documents. His workplace, which she had not yet occupied, remained a memorial to him. One evening, incapable of slumber, she entered and commenced examining his private archives. She was not seeking anything specific, merely a profounder link to the man who had transformed her existence. Concealed in a secured compartment of his workstation, she discovered a collection of antique hide-covered registers. They were not monetary logs. They appeared to be a sort of individual diary replete with Reginald's reflections, insights, and elaborate notations on people he had met over his extended life. She located herself, her designation initially emerging approximately a year prior. Encountered a youthful lady at a bistro today, a photographer, melancholic gaze, but a compassionate essence. Evokes memories of Amelia. Amelia was his deceased spouse. Perusing his insights about their dialogues was akin to reliving their companionship through his perspective. It was a solace, a validation that their bond had been genuine. Then she encountered another designation, one that chilled her veins. Harrington. It was not Alex. It was his father, Theodore Harrington. The records dated back 4 decades. Reginald, then a youthful, aspiring innovator, had collaborated with Theodore Harrington on a revolutionary innovation project. According to Reginald's notations, it had been his invention, his brilliance. But Harrington, who managed the finances, had methodically deceived him. He had established phantom organizations, fabricated documents, and expelled Reginald, appropriating the enterprise and the inventions, leaving him almost insolvent. Theodore is a hunter in a custom suit, Reginald had inscribed. He does not generate, he devours. He constructs his heritage on the debris of other men's aspirations. I will not be his final casualty, but I vow on my existence I will reconstruct, and one day the designation Harrington will respond for what it has accomplished. Sophia reclined, astounded. This was not merely a haphazard gesture of benevolence. It was a multi-generational strategy game, and Reginald had just executed the concluding, ruinous maneuver. He had not selected her solely because she was benevolent. He selected her because she was the ideal tool of his prolonged, brewing retribution. She was the one individual whose elevation would provoke the absolute and complete devastation of Theodore Harrington's heritage, his offspring, Alex. The disclosure was disconcerting. It tinged Reginald's benevolence with something more shadowy, more deliberate. Had he been evaluating her? Was his companionship merely a vehicle to a goal? She experienced a twinge of disenchantment, but as she continued reading, she observed it was more nuanced. He inscribed about monitoring Alex from a distance over the years, perceiving the identical empty aspiration, the identical mercenary harshness as his father. The lad is his father's offspring, one record stated. He was a fine lady, a lady with radiance in her essence. He will attempt to quench it. Men like that cannot endure witnessing a radiance they did not produce. He had witnessed it all. He had witnessed her union, her dissolution, her anguish. His choice was not solely about retribution. It was about equity. It was about salvaging a heritage, his own, and a person, hers, from the consuming gloom of men like the Harringtons. This fresh insight equipped her. It clarified the concealed intentions, the magnificent scheme. It also clarified Marcus Everton. In a subsequent record, Reginald had inscribed about him, "Marcus is devoted, ingenious, and merciless. He does not confide readily. He views my companionship with the girl from the bistro as a foolishness. He will challenge her. If she demonstrates her fortitude, he will become her most formidable supporter. If she stumbles, he will consume her to shield the enterprise." The contest was far more hazardous than she had comprehended. Everton was not merely awaiting her to commit an error. He was assessing whether she was deserving of Reginald's heritage. The following day, she summoned a meeting with Everton, solely the pair of them. She entered his workplace, a streamlined, sparse area that mirrored his character. Marcus, she initiated, omitting any courtesies. "I have been inspecting some of Mr. Hawthorne's individual archives, including his past with Theodore Harrington." Everton's facade of impassivity ultimately fractured. A spark of authentic astonishment traversed his features. He reclined in his seat, examining her with fresh eyes. "I perceive. He never informed me," Sophia stated, her tone subdued but resolute. "He permitted me to believe it was merely about a straightforward companionship." "Why?" "Because it was," Everton responded, his inflection mellowing for the first occasion. "The matter with the Harringtons was a specter, a drive from his history. But his selection of you, Ms. Moretti, was about the perspective. He perceived your temperament as the remedy to their venom. He desired your genuineness to be the foundation of your guidance, unspoiled by a pursuit for retribution. The equity for what the Harringtons accomplished was merely a beneficial outcome." He rose and proceeded to the pane, gazing down at the metropolis beneath. Reginald's utmost dread was that his dominion would become a mirror of men like Theodore and Alexander Harrington, frigid, voracious, bereft of compassion. He granted it to you because he trusted you would safeguard its essence. He pivoted to confront her, and for the first time she sensed he was truly perceiving her, not as a hindrance, but as an heir. "The inquiry is, Miss Moretti," he stated, his tone now a subdued provocation. "What are you going to accomplish with it?" The challenge had been issued. The examination had commenced. The decline of Alexander Harrington was not an abrupt, volatile occurrence. It was a gradual, tormenting descent. The narrative of the soiree became a myth in Los Angeles's economic spheres. A warning story murmured at every lounge and executive suite. Alex, once the favored prodigy, was now an outcast. The disgrace was a blemish he could not erase. Patrons, alarmed by his communal disintegration and the view that he was a fool, began to withdraw their portfolios from his organization. His associates, perceiving the inevitable, started plotting to acquire his share. The Harrington designation, once his premier resource, was now a weight, pulling him to the depths. Victoria Beaumont was the initial deserter from the submerging vessel. Sophia observed a snippet in a scandal section. Victoria was now associated with a Hollywood producer. The piece cited an unidentified acquaintance who stated Victoria had been profoundly troubled by Alex's volatility and had terminated the association to preserve her own welfare. It was an expert lesson in publicity management. She had deprived him of his honor and then his decorative companion. Sophia observed it all from the fortified bastion of Hawthorne Tower. She experienced a somber, remote contentment, but it was not the victorious sensation she might have anticipated. It was more akin to observing a tempest fury from a secure vantage, a tempest she had unintentionally generated. The unprocessed individual agony Alex had inflicted upon her was being supplanted by a type of detached compassion. She was too occupied to linger on it. Under Everton's astonishingly committed guidance, she was acquiring how to exercise her authority. She possessed an innate aptitude for it, a capacity to penetrate the clamor and perceive the human component in every commercial choice. She initiated a fresh program for the Hawthorne Foundation, a substantial subsidy scheme to bolster budding creators and photographers, a tribute to the aspiration she had once been compelled to forsake. The action was praised in the media. She was no longer the service successor. She was the benefactor of the arts, a forward thinker perpetuating Reginald's generous ethos. Approximately 3 months following the soiree, her aide notified her that Alex was in the entrance hall again. This occasion, he had not arrived insisting on encountering her. He had merely stated he would linger. Throughout the day, he remained in the communal entrance hall of the Hawthorne Tower, a phantom in a sight of dominance. The protection sentinels maintained a cautious watch on him, but he caused no disturbance. He simply remained, gazing at vacancy, a man who had forfeited his realm, now positioned on a stylish seat that resembled a makeshift throne. As Sophia was departing for the day, she traversed the entrance hall. She could have utilized a private lift, but she opted not to. She required to conclude this segment. He glanced up as she neared. The alteration in him was startling. The conceited sparkle in his eye was vanished. His costly attire was disheveled. His features were emaciated, and he appeared fractured. "Sophie?" he uttered, his tone a raspy rasp. He rose but appeared unstable on his limbs. "Greetings, Alex," she stated. Her tone was not frigid, not wrathful. It was merely composed. "I merely desire to converse," he faltered. "Not regarding the wealth, not regarding any of that. I desire to express I am remorseful." The remorse, when it ultimately arrived, felt empty, unexciting. It was a term uttered too tardily after the injury had already healed. "I am aware," she stated plainly. His features collapsed. "You fail to comprehend. I forfeited everything. My organization, my standing, Victoria, it is all vanished." "You did not forfeit it, Alex," she stated, her tone mild but resolute. "It was seized." "No, that is not accurate either. It was never truly yours initially. Your organization was constructed on your father's standing. Your standing was constructed on a persona you projected. And Victoria was with the persona, not with you. It was all a fragile structure. Reginald's testament was not a tempest. It was merely a puff of air." He gaped at her, the stark, unaltered verity striking him more forcefully than any affront ever could. "What am I supposed to accomplish now?" he murmured, his tone fracturing. It was the initial sincere inquiry he had ever posed to her. Sophia regarded the man before her, no longer a fiend from her history, but a profoundly imperfect, pitiful human. The resentment she had harbored for so long ultimately entirely dissipated. There was naught remaining to despise. Her salvation, she comprehended in that instant, had naught to do with his annihilation. It had to do with her own formation. "I do not know, Alex," she stated, and her tone was filled with an unexpected genuineness. "For the first time in your existence, you get to determine what you are composed of without your father's designation or your wealth to conceal behind. You must construct something authentic. That is all any of us can accomplish." She pivoted and departed, not glancing backward. She left him positioned in the expansive entrance hall, a lone silhouette overshadowed by the dominion she now directed. There was no victory in her strides, only the serene, consistent cadence of a lady finally genuinely entering her own existence. 6 months afterward, spring had reached Los Angeles, adorning the metropolis in gentle hues of verdant and amber. The atmosphere was replete with a feeling of revival that resonated in Sophia's own spirit. The designation Sophia Moretti no longer pertained to the rumor sections. It pertained to the commerce pages and the creative periodicals. She had discovered her cadence. She was not the merciless magnate the directors might have initially dreaded, nor the innocent creator they had first presumed. She was something novel, a guide who guided with compassion, a business lady with a creator's essence. She had honored her commitment to Reginald. She had not permitted the wealth to alter her. She had permitted it to enhance the finest aspects of herself. Hawthorne International was prospering under her serene, stable guidance, advancing into eco-friendly innovations and moral ventures, endeavors Reginald had envisioned but never had the opportunity to execute. This evening was the inauguration of the Awakening Showcase at an art space in Silver Lake. It was the initial showcase, financed completely by her Fresh Foundation subsidy, displaying the creations of 10 obscure photographers. It was conducted in the identical art space where she had been directing that fateful day she had encountered Alex. She traversed the thronged chamber, no longer unseen. Individuals welcomed her with deference: creators, reviewers, acquirers. They did not perceive a former spouse or a successor. They perceived the lady who had granted them an opportunity. Marcus Everton was present, positioned by the beverage counter, appearing atypically at ease. He elevated his vessel to her in a mute salute of endorsement. He had become her most reliable counselor and astonishingly her companion. Sophia halted before a sequence of monochrome images documenting overlooked, disregarded segments of the metropolis. A solitary bloom emerging through a fissure in the concrete, the mirror of a high-rise in a water pool, the fatigued palms of an aged lady resting on a transit barrier. They were exquisite, evocative, and replete with a serene, tenacious optimism. They were her images, under an alias. She had presented her own creations to the panel. They had selected it based on its own value. Observing her creations on the partition, valued by outsiders, was a sensation more deep and gratifying than endorsing any multi-billion transaction. A youthful lady approached to stand adjacent to her. "These are remarkable," the lady stated. "They compel you to perceive the elements you pass daily." "Gratitude," Sophia stated, a sincere beam illuminating her features. That is what the creator was aspiring for. She surveyed the chamber, at the lively creations, at the optimistic visages of the youthful photographers, at the metropolis illuminations flickering through the art space pane. Her existence, once diminutive and mute, was now replete with intent and hue. The phantoms of her history were ultimately vanished. Alex, his father, their heritage of emptiness. They were not more than dimmed images from an existence she no longer inhabited. Reginald had granted her a key to a dominion, but what he had truly granted her was the key to her own existence. She was no longer the focus in someone else's depiction. She was the overseer, the creator, the forward thinker. And this was merely the commencement. Sophia Moretti had finally surfaced, and she was prepared to shape her own destiny. Sophia's path demonstrates to us that genuine authority is not about the wealth you possess, but the individual you evolve into when everything is removed. She transitioned from being an unseen lady disregarded by the man who should have treasured her most to a colossus of commerce who reformed a heritage on her own conditions. Her salvation was not in her ex-husband's decline, but in her own ascent. An ascent constructed on benevolence, tenacity, and the bravery to finally be perceived. What did you think of Sophia's tale? Do you trust in fateful equity? Inform me your reflections in the remarks below. If you were touched by her astonishing metamorphosis, please provide this video a positive rating. Distribute it with someone who adores a narrative of fortitude and salvation. And do not neglect to join for more heartfelt narratives that will linger with you long after you have concluded viewing.